Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the August 19th, 2020 episode of Automation Hour. We are thrilled that you are here. So as usual, we'll get started running through a few logistics before we get to today's main content with Terry. So Terry, you want to jump to that next slide? Perfect. So all lines are muted. However, we definitely have the question pane here in GoToWebinar, as well as we are monitoring the Automation Hour Trailblazer community group. We are also recording the session and we will post it to our YouTube channel after the session is over. And as always, we invite you to connect with us where it makes the most sense for you. You can find us on the Trailblazer community, our website, LinkedIn and Twitter, or of course our YouTube channel where we post all these videos. All right, so we have some great sessions coming up. We have links to all of those in here, so we definitely encourage you to get registered for those so we can see you on future episodes of Automation Hour. We're working on wrapping up the last half of this year, and then we'll get started on next year here pretty soon. And of course, we cannot bring you this without saying thank you to our sponsor. So Concrete.io has been with us since the beginning of Automation Hour and makes it possible for us to bring this to you free of charge. So huge shout out to them. Appreciate that and their support of us in this. So with that, of course, your co-host, me, I am Michelle Hansen, and we have Rakesh Gupta here with us as well today. Before we turn it over to our guest presenter of the hour, so Terry, I am going to pass it over to you. I think you need no introduction, but if you'd like to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Awesome, very good. Well, thank you both for the invite to come and do this. It is an honor to participate with you guys and to be able to share a few thoughts with you today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some new concepts with Flow, and let me start by sharing this thought with you that transitioning to new things, at least for me, can cause a little bit of stress, maybe a little bit of anxiety, perhaps sometimes even a little frustration. I can get caught in a routine of doing what's comfortable, and then it happens. You know, it's that moment when what was is no longer, and what is my new reality. And I'm forced out of my comfort zone into that place that can feel just a little bit foreign. Maybe even for a time, I can feel a little bit lost, maybe a little bit even discouraged. Now, I know that I can't interact with you all like I would like to here that are on the webinar with me, but how many of you have ever purchased a new car, or at least a new to you car? My guess is most of us have probably experienced that process of buying a new car. Do you remember the first time you drove that car at night and you got in there and you were looking for the lights to turn on the lights so that you could see as you drove out onto the streets at night? Or maybe you were caught in a rainstorm and you were trying to figure out where are the windshield wipers, and they just weren't where you were expecting them to be. I recently had the same experience. This is my old car. It's a Lexus sedan. I've owned Lexus sedans for a number of years. I love them. They are awesome. When I would travel, it was the smoothest ride, the most comfortable car ever of my life. I think they were fantastic, but I also like to do woodworking. So when I'm not doing Salesforce, you might find me in my wood shop where I would be building like cabinets or other fun things. I just like to do that as kind of my hobby. And it was one thing that I didn't like about my Lexus is that it doesn't do wood well. There are times when you're doing woodworking that you have to be able to carry large things, sometimes sheets of wood, and the Lexus didn't do that very well for me. So recently, I purchased a new vehicle. And this thing is awesome, but it is incredibly different from my old sedan. Even the way you park something like this is different. I now understand why when you see people who drive big trucks, why they back up into a parking spot. It's because it's easier to navigate that machine into your parking spot when you are enormously large in comparison to the car. I can do things with my truck I could never do with my Lexus. I can go places that I could never go before. I can haul things that I could never carry in my car. I am even big enough when I'm in my truck that I can block the view of all those people behind me. I can be that guy that you don't want to be behind because you can't see around me. It is awesome the things that I can do in my truck, and it's reasonably comfortable, not as comfortable as what my sedan was, but it is still very comfortable to ride in. Now, we've been kind of experiencing the same kind of phenomenon with Salesforce automation tools. We were very comfortable with Process Builder. We were even comfortable with workflow rules, but they were limited in their capability. And so Flow was introduced to us. And like all things new, when it's introduced, there are some new concepts that maybe for most admins seemed a little bit foreign. We found ourselves in that big wide open space looking for maybe the light switches or the windshield wipers, thinking, man, this is not where they were supposed to be. It didn't feel natural to us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Terry Miller. There's a QR code up in the top corner. If you want to reach out to me, you are welcome to scan that. That gives you all of my contact information. Love hearing from you. I am a Salesforce MVP independent consultant, and I just love mentoring and teaching other people. It's probably the thing that I like most about what I do. I also have worked quite a bit with the Des Moines Area Community College. That's our local community college here where I'm at, to help introduce Salesforce to the broader community. Like probably where you're at, you have trouble finding Salesforce talent. We do here as well. And we're trying to see if we can have an impact on that. So I do lead the Des Moines user group as well, the Trailblazer user group. We welcome everybody. So if you want to join our group, we will not stop you. We have a good time. We've been in the process of doing quite a bit with Flow and trying to help our community learn that as well. Probably my favorite one on here is I am guilty of talking to stuffed animals, Einstein being my favorite. You will probably find evidence of that if you jump out to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/TerrySivich. You'll find me having a few conversations with Einstein. He's a pretty smart guy, so I get a lot of counsel from Einstein. He's just wonderful. Now, enough about me. When I visit with admins, I will often hear things like, Terry, Flow is hard. It's intimidating. I am not a developer, and this feels an awful lot like developer-y things to me. Well, if Flow hasn't clicked for you yet, maybe you feel a little bit lost, maybe confused, then I would invite you to stay tuned in here. We're going to hopefully provide you a few helpful concepts that will, or some of those key terms, concepts that might help turn on a few light bulbs for you here today. So buckle in and let's go ahead and take a quick look at our agenda. I'm going to try to take this at a reasonable pace so that you're able to consume it, but we've got something hopefully for a little bit of something here for everybody. If you need to dive a little bit deeper, I do have some of this content on my website, terrysivich.com. There will be blog posts and videos that walk you through this. I'm still working on getting all of the content there, so subscribe. That way you don't miss them when those become available. But let's introduce our use case, and this is what we're going to talk about throughout the day, or throughout the next 40 minutes or so. Our use case is simply this. We have an HR recruiting department, and they've come to us and they said, hey, Terry, we would like to be able to see on the screen a simple count of the number of open positions we have and the number of positions we have filled. Now, all of you good admins might be thinking, well, Terry, why not just use reports and dashboards? Duh. Well, it's because we're here to learn flow. And reports and dashboards you already know. So we're going to do the same thing you might do in a dashboard. We're going to use it. We're going to use flow to do it today. So it'll be a lot of fun as we kind of go through this. So let's jump in and see what our first concept is. Our first concept that I really want you to understand is what is an element and what is a resource. There's a simple way to maybe think about them. And I look at it this way. A resources are created and used. You always have to create it and then you can use it. An element is something that you will configure to do stuff for you. So resources are created and used. Elements are configured to do stuff. Now, if we were in English class, we could say resources are nouns, they're tangible. Elements are verbs, they're actions. Now, I almost failed English, so that could be totally off base, but that was kind of the thing that popped in my head when I thought about it. One of them is something that is tangible, I can kind of put my hands on. The other one is something that does stuff for me. Actions and verbs that seem to make sense, but maybe you can tell me if I'm totally nuts. But let's actually go into Salesforce and let's take a look around. And the first thing here that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to actually create our screen flow. It is a screen flow because we need to display these counts to our HR folks. So we're going to do a new flow. It will be a screen flow. And then let's just kind of take a quick navigation of the environment here that we find ourselves in. On the left side of the screen, we have where we can create resources. Remember, resources are things that we create and then can use. Underneath the little plus sign is where we will find our elements. Elements are things that we can configure to do stuff for us. Now you'll notice I'm in the auto layout, so elements sit over here right on top of my flow where I can add them. If I switch to the freeform layout, my elements come over to the left-hand side of the screen, just like resources, and they hide themselves underneath these tabs, elements, and then the manager where I have my resources. Now, personally, I like the auto layout. And I like the auto layout primarily because I'm frequently teaching other people how to do flow that are fairly new at it. And I think that it's a little bit more intuitive than when you go into that big white open space with nothing there, because that can be a little bit intimidating and confusing for people. So I like auto layout just for the simplicity. There will be times when you get into more complex flows that auto layout will not work for you. You will have to switch to the freeform. But again, if you're learning, let Salesforce help you as much as you can. Stick with the auto layout, and I think you'll find that to be a little bit simpler. Now, we need to create two resources for our use case, and those resources are simply going to be the number of open positions. We need a place that will hold that count, and a place that will hold the count for the number of filled positions. But before we do that, I want to ask you a few questions. The first question for you, and again, I wish I could interact with you, but I'm going to pretend that you're going to answer these questions for me. Do you have a dresser in your bedroom at home? I suspect 98% of us have a dresser in our bedroom at home. And in that dresser, I bet you have a drawer in that bedroom, at least one drawer in that bedroom. Now, here's something you may not know about me. Some of you might, but I like things organized. I hate chaos. It drives me insane. So like you, I have a dresser in my bedroom and it has drawers in it. One of those drawers is for socks. Now I have these lovely trailhead socks that somebody gave me probably at Dreamforce or someplace. I've never worn them, but these socks go in my socks drawer. It's where they belong. Anytime I need these socks, I simply go to my socks drawer and there they are, right where I left them. Now this might be a little bit of a stretch for you to imagine, but I also have a pants drawer. Pants go in my pants drawer, socks go in my socks drawer, and I have a shirts drawer too, and shirts go in the shirts drawer. Socks don't go in the shirts drawer because socks go in the socks drawer. That's where they belong. That's what's defined to go into that drawer is my socks. The cool thing about drawers, anytime I need what's in them, I simply go, open the drawer, and there it is for me, right where I put them. Variables in Flow is a new concept for a lot of admins. Variables are simply drawers. I can create a variable and anything I store in that variable will be available for me to use as I need it. Now, you might ask, why are variables important to us? And I'm glad you asked. Because we use variables anytime we need to temporarily store something. We use variables anytime we need to temporarily store something. So let's jump back over to our flow and let's create our two variables that we talked about just a few moments ago. And so I'm going to go to resource and I'm going to click that new resource button and it's going to ask me what type of resource do I want to create. I'm going to open that up and that variable is the very first one on my list. Now I'm going to give my variable a name. This is going to be a number, so I'm going to abbreviate it MBR. And it's going to be open positions is what I'm going to create here. I do not have my glasses on, so hopefully I spelled that right. And then I get to this question of data type. Data type allows me to define what type of data is going to be stored in this particular variable. Socks go in the socks drawer, shirts go in the shirts drawer, pants go in the pants drawer. Variables have a type that you need to define for its use. In this use case, we need these to be numbers, so I'm simply going to select a number. Now, I could select any of those other types. If I selected a text, then I can store alphanumeric things in those. My favorite one on this list is the record. Records are really cool because I can take and store an entire Salesforce record into a record variable. And anytime I need to reference any field within that record, it just is a wonderful thing. So again, back to our use case, number is what we need here. So I'm going to select number and it's going to ask me, how many decimal points do I need? I don't need any. So I'm going to put that back to 1. And then I can define a default value. And I'm going to set that default value also to 0. I said 1 up here for decimal points, 0 for decimal points, and 0 for my default value. So that creates my open positions variable. I need to do that same thing now for my filled position. So I'm going to go back to variable, number, filled positions. Data type, it'll be number, decimals, 0, default value, 0, and done. As I build those, you'll see those show up then on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, before I can store values into our variables, we first need now to query some data. And you might be thinking, whoa, whoa, whoa there, Terry, slow down. You just said query some data. Did you forget? I'm not a developer. Well, okay, you're not a developer, but let me ask you this. Can you create a list view? If I were to say, go to the account tab in Salesforce and create a list view for me, could you do that as an admin? I suspect you could. If you can do that, then you have the skills that you need in order to use the get element in Salesforce to query some data. So let's go create a get statement. We'll add that to our flow. And the elements are all listed underneath the plus sign. There's our get. I'm going to give it a label. I say get positions. And then I'm asked, what object do I want to get records from? If I was creating a list view on the account object, I go to the account object, I create my list view. If I need to get data from the account object, I would simply select that object and then define what I need. Now, positions in our situation is a custom object, and it has a status field on that object that tells us if it's filled or open. So my object in this use case is going to be positions. So I'll select that, and as I do that, here's where it looks just like my list views. I have my field and the criteria that I need in order to define what I'm looking for. So I'm going to jump in there. There's all of my fields that I have on that position object. If I slide down, there's that status field where it equals open, add another condition where status equals filled. And then I need to adjust that requirements, the condition requirements, and make it an or. So it brings back both opened and or filled positions. I'm going to slide down that get, and then I come to this, how many records do you want to store concept? So let me talk to you a little bit about this one before we go too far. Those of you who don't know me, you don't know that I grew up in a very strict Christian home. You might ask, well, Terry, how strict was your home? Well, it was so strict that playing cards was not allowed in my home. I suppose it was probably because it would lead to gambling. Gambling leads to addiction, and addictions, you know, that's not good. Well, I don't believe that to be true. I think that it can be, but I don't believe it to be so bad that you can't have playing cards. So lucky for you, I brought with me my deck of playing cards. Now, I want to use these cards to kind of explain that every card in this deck is going to represent a record in Salesforce. So I may have a 10, I believe that's a spade. I have a record that's a 10 of spade. I have a record here that's a 3 of hearts. This is a record in Salesforce. Now, this concept of a collection is simply more than one record. So if I wanted to understand the term collection, simply think of your deck of cards. This represents a collection. This is a record. Multiple cards would be a collection. You can define several variable types or several data types to be a collection. It doesn't just have to be records. It could be a collection of numbers. It can be a collection of text values. But collection is a concept that you want to understand. It's simply multiple values within that variable. So jumping back over here then to our demo. In our case, we need to grab all of the open and all of the filled positions. And so we are going to use all records. And I'll tell you that there are a couple ways you can create collections. When you define a variable, there's a little checkbox on that screen that allows you to say, hey, let me store multiple things within that variable. That would be one way to create a collection, but I would say that probably the more common collection is simply when we select all records in a get statement. That's going to bring back multiple records into a collection of records. The next item on that screen is automatically store all fields. So how do you want Salesforce to handle this? So I'm a fan of the automatically store all fields when you're new. If you're brand new to Flow, there is no reason you have to feel like you have to conquer the world on your first day of learning Flow. There's nothing wrong with letting Salesforce help you. So automatically store all fields is your easiest option. Let Salesforce do all the heavy lifting for you. Now, the next two begin to get a little bit more advanced, and personally, there are good reasons to use these. But I could choose the fields that I want and let Salesforce do all the rest. So Salesforce handles the naming of everything. And I get to say, I really only want to see the ID and the status field. I could do that with that second option. The third option is to choose the fields and assign them to variables. That gives you ultimate control over your bringing back of data. That one's really cool. A lot of good use cases for all of these. But again, we're going to just stay with the default because it's a simple option for those of you learning new. All right, we have our get statement now defined, and that shows up on our canvas. Now with that, I want to go back to our deck of cards, and we're going to play a little game here. How many of you are familiar with the game Slapjack? And the game Slapjack, we're going to have like 4 players, and instead of dealing out the cards like a professional guy, I'm just going to put 4 piles here on our desk. And in the game Slapjack, what's really interesting about this game is that when you turn a card over, the only card in this game that really matters is this one that is face up. And Slapjack, the way it works is that you go around and everybody takes and puts their card down on face up. And if the card that's face up is the jack, the first person that slaps their hand on that deck, they get to keep all of those cards and add them to their deck. The thing with Slapjack that I want you to remember is the card that is face up is the only one that matters. Let's go back to our demo. The next thing that we need to do in our demo is to loop through these records that we just got from our get statement. So I'm going to throw in here now a loop, and we're going to give it a name. Loop through positions. And it's going to point back to that positions from the get positions that we just queried. So that's our query. We're going to loop through each one of those, and I'm going to say done. And you're going to see that it puts a circle on my canvas for me. That circle is important to us because when I'm inside the circle, the only card or the only record that matters is the record that is face up. Salesforce is going to call this record current item from loop. Current item from loop. Now, if I'm looking at just the one record as I come into this particular loop, the first thing I need to do with that record is I need to look at the status and say, okay, status of current item in loop. Is your status filled or are you open? Because I need to know that in order to know what direction I need to go. We're going to do that with a decision. A decision tells me the direction. It's kind of like if I pulled up to an intersection and there's a traffic cop up in front of me, and that traffic cop is telling me I need to go this way or this way. That's what a decision element is like. It's if you want to compare it to Process Builder, it's the diamond shaped thing that had your true and your false path. If it's true, you go down the true path, otherwise you go down the false path. That's what decisions do for us inside of Flow. So let's go ahead and define our first decision. So we're going to jump in here, select a decision. We're going to give it a label. Let's see, decision status. I think that will work. Now our label is the outcome. So this is like, which path am I going to go down? That's your outcome, true, false, are your outcomes here. So the first one, I'm going to simply say this is my open. And my resource, or the way that I'm going to know that it's open, is that my current item from loop, where the status equals open. That's my condition. Anytime the current item, my current card that is face up, and when that card is set to open, I'm going to go down this particular path. Now, the nice thing with decisions and flow that was different than Process Builder is I can have multiple paths here. So I'm going to click on this plus sign, and I'm going to do another path that is for filled. Current item from loop, click into that, scroll down to status, equals filled. Now, if it doesn't equal any of those, if it doesn't equal either of those two, then I'm going to go down this default outcome path. Now, I'm not a big fan of the label default outcomes. I've heard several other people say that. I'm not a fan of that either. I normally will change it to something a little bit more meaningful. In our use case, I'm just going to say we're going to skip it. In reality, because I queried up here at the top the two statuses that of opened and filled, I should never go down that skip path anyway. Everything should either come through the open or the filled position. Okay, now that we understand that decision, we've got our direction, we need to talk about an assignment element. And the assignment element is going to increment our variables that we define. They're going to increment them by 1 anytime we hit that assignment. Now, I will tell you this, that assignments give variables value. Now, you might think of it this way. Variables can sometimes have a bit of an identity crisis. We define them early on as in our resources, but in a lot of cases, we don't give them a value right away. And so they're sitting out there. They know what they are, but they don't hold anything yet. So they know what they're supposed to hold. It's supposed to be my socks drawer, but there's no socks in it yet. So they know what they're about, but they don't know yet what it's going to be, the actual color of the socks or whatever. So it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like, well, I lost my train of thought now. So it's kind of like Terry lost his train of thought. So let's go ahead, let's move on and let's actually create our assignment, and then I'll figure out what my train of thought was perhaps later. And let's do our open here. Let's scroll down to an assignment. Let's give it a name. And this is going to be assign the open position. Okay, so that's the name of our assignment. And what that assignment is simply going to do is it's going to increment the number of open positions. We're going to increment it or add 1 as we come through that loop. So if I come down this path, anytime I hit this particular assignment, it's going to take what its previous value was and it's going to add 1 to it. I'm going to do the same thing, repeat this over here on the filled side. So we'll do another assignment. This will be assign filled positions. We will find our variable for filled. We're going to add 1. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. If I start up here at the loop, I am coming down, I'm making a decision. What's the status? Let's say it's open. If I come down here and I hit this open assignment, then my open positions variable that we define now goes from 0 to 1. Next time I come through the loop, if I come down this path, that's going to go from 1 to 2. And it's just going to increment our count as we loop through each one of our cards. Now, the next thing here, oh, that was really nice of me. I wasn't sharing the right screen. Here's what, let me back up just a second. See, I got so flustered that I lost my train of thought with the assign thing now that I didn't even show you the screen. So let me go back in here and edit this real quick just so that you can see what I didn't show you. I gave my assignment a variable name, and then I came down here to the variable and I simply selected the variable that we created, number of open positions, and I added 1. So my apologies for not moving that screen forward for you to see that demo. And then I repeated the same thing over here on the filled positions. Now, as I travel through my loop, I'm going to then come back down here to the bottom of the screen, and it's just simply going to follow the path right back up to the beginning up here where I hit the loop again. Now, when that happens, so I've got my collection of cards. When that happens, I have my current item in loop. This card gets discarded, and then the next card gets turned over, and this card now becomes my current item in loop. Once it goes through the circle within my loop, it's discarded and the next card becomes current item in loop. It's going to do that process all the way through till I get through all of my cards, and then I get to the last card on my deck. It's going to process through my loop and it's going to be discarded, and then I am going to end up moving through the after last path of my flow. I've made it all the way through now, my flow, and my variables have all been processed through those assignments. And so now I should have a count for the number of open positions and the number of filled positions. And so next, all I need to do is simply create a screen. Now, screens are awesome because that's what really brings your user experience to life. There are so many options on screens. It would literally take us a week or longer of sessions in order to go through everything on the screen. But let's go ahead and create a nice user experience here for our HR department. We're going to slide this up and create a screen. So we're going to slide through here. Screen right there at the top. We're going to give it a label. And I'm going to configure the header. In my case, I don't really need this header up here at the top, so I'm going to take that away. I also, because this is just simply a static screen that we're going to show, I don't really need these navigation tools at the bottom either. So I'm going to say, don't show the footer. So I'm down to just a blank spot now for my screen that I can work with. And because we are awesome admins, we kind of want to make this look really sharp. So we're going to add a section to the page. And that section was right here. I simply drag that up. And with a section, I'm able to determine how many columns I want. So I'm going to create 2 columns on the screen. So I'm going to go to that side and just simply add another column. You'll see that it leaves me with 2 boxes or 2 spaces that I can work with on my screen. Now I'm going to drag over display text. Display text was here on the side. I simply pick that up and drag it. I think your screen might go black when I do that. I'm not sure why, but all I did was grab that display text, move it up to the first column in my flow screen, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. Everything in flow needs a name. So this is going to be called open, display open position. Apologize if my spelling is off. And then I will define what I want this to look like by coming down here to the big rich text area box. And I'm just going to say this will be open positions. This is going to be what I want to call it. And then I need to point to the variable that we created, which if I scroll through here will be my number of open positions. Now I can make that a little bit prettier. So let's center it. Let's highlight the open and make it bold. And then let's make this text a little bit bigger. So we will let's go to 36. That should be nice. And then let's repeat that same process. I'm going to grab display text and drag that over to the other empty side. And I'm going to give it its name. Display build positions count. And then my text that I'm going to have in here, we'll just simply give it a label of filled Field positions, and I need my variable. So we'll grab that resource from the list. We're going to center everything. We'll make our title bold and make our variable nice and big, 36. So now I've got my screen defined and I can simply click done. And now we've got our display ready to go. So let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to save it with the name. Let's see, this is going to be on the positions object. So I'm going to start with that as my naming convention. I'm going to tell us that it's a screen. So I'm going to have that as my next word. And then I'm going to say what it is that it actually does, which it is a position status count. And hit save. Now I will get this warning, and that warning is happening because my screen, I took off the footers. It doesn't like the fact that I didn't give it some navigation. It will still compile and work just fine with it, but do read through those because sometimes they can be important things. It's just simply a warning in this case that, hey, you missed your navigation. And I did that on purpose, so that's okay. Now, if I run this flow, hopefully I get a screen with some counts on it. And sure enough, I do. Now I can take that flow once I activate it and add it to like a home page. I could add it to wherever it is that I need to show the HR department what their counts are. So that is the end result of what we just created. Now, I will tell you that there is another way we could have done this other than reports and dashboards. We could have used what's called a filtered collection. If I would have done a filtered collection, my flow would have looked something like this, would have looked a lot like this. I would have had an element here called a filter open positions. And this concept, if I take my deck of cards, this would be like, this is my collection of cards. And let's say in my collection, I want all of the red cards out of this. So I might filter this to where all my red cards, I move into a new collection. So now I end up with two collections. I have my original collection, and then I have a new collection that is my filtered results. So that's what your filtered collection is going to do. It just gives you a second collection with the records that you want to be included in that. Filtered collection, the status word equals open. That's my first filter. The next one that I am creating is where my status is filled. Now in this particular one, you'll see over here in my resources, I now actually have three collections. I have my original from the get, I have my filtered open and my filtered filled. And then in my assignment, all I simply have to do is say, hey, number open position variable, I want you to be equal to the count of the number of records that is in that filtered collection for open. Same thing with the filled positions, equals count of the number of records in the filled position filter. And then I simply throw that onto the screen. Screen looks just like what it did in our previous example. I can run that one. I should get hopefully the same result. So that's another alternative. Filtered collections are really nice because it can eliminate that loop. Loops a lot of times are a little bit confusing for people. And so that would be kind of a way that you could even work around the need for a filtered loop. So nice option there. With that, I will introduce to you a new resource that we have available. These two nice people on the screen here love to help answer flow questions for you. So if you have a flow question or something that you are struggling with as it relates specifically to flow and you need some help with it, Flow office hours is an option for you to come and get some help. I always tell people Andy's the smart one of the group, but we will do our best to try to help you. If you're a flow expert and you just love to help people, then you're welcome to join as well. We'd love to have people come in and that's able to just give some time or give some energy back to the community. You're willing to help other people. That's awesome. We need that as well. So this occurs every second Friday of the month at 2 o'clock Eastern time. You do need to register, similar like what you register for this class. You do need to register at flowofficehours.com. We will help you if you get stuck with a specific flow. You're able to share that with us, share the flow with us, provided it's all de-identified, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we're here to be a resource for you, to help however we can, to help you on this journey as you learn flow. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Michelle, and let you kind of see if we have any questions out there. I would be happy to try to answer those.
Absolutely. Well, Stu has had lots of good things to say. So let's see. Variable socks are like onions. They both have layers.
Yeah.
Also, I think we've come up with a Flota quote, which is the Flow Yoda quote. So playing cards is the path to the dark side. Cards lead to variables. Variables lead to loops. Loops lead to decisions.
Yes.
So this is awesome. So, all right, Stu would like to know, question, naming convention for variables. Do you ever prefix your variables with VAR? Is there a common rule or standard around that?
I don't use the I used to use VAR because I was seeing that's what other people were doing. And I tend to kind of like to know what is holding, what that variable is holding. So I will tend to navigate to actually what type of data it is. I do have a naming convention that I use. I have a blog post on it at terrystibitz.com. So if you want to use it, you're welcome to. I really don't care what you use for naming convention as long as you have one. I've walked into so many clients who have had these nice large flows, and they can be impossible to try to debug and jump into if there's not a good, consistent way of naming what you're doing inside that flow. I've also had people say naming conventions suck. And it's much better just to explain what the variable is. It's like, yeah, but you can't find anything because nobody knows how you're explaining it. So I like it. I like naming conventions. It's kind of my soapbox. Yeah, use them.
Yeah, I think within the kind of the flow community, there's generally a sense of, as long as you have a naming convention, that's the important part. How you make it is kind of up to you and what works best for your company or your team. But yeah, like I've done it with a prefix. I've seen people do it with a suffix. Monica Sandberg has done a couple presentations, and she has just an absolutely insane naming convention document. She literally names everything. So yeah, I think as long as you have one, that's kind of what we want to encourage, right, Terry?
100%, yes.
So perfect. So you actually showed building the flow two ways, one with the loop and then one with the collection filters. Which one is better? Or how do you, I guess, in a lot of the architecture classes, it's all about defend your design decision. Like there's multiple ways to do things in Salesforce. So it's just justify and defend your position. So Terry, how do you decide?
Yeah, and a lot of what I do when I teach, I don't necessarily teach it to be the best path to use as much as I'm trying to teach concepts. So if I were to build this, I would use a filtered collection. I would do it for a couple of reasons. Mostly because it is fewer elements on my canvas. That's kind of just an easy one to kind of visualize. It's less complex. It'd be easier for somebody to follow. Less pieces that as the flow is processing. This with the filtered, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements on my canvas. With my loop, I may have had like 6 elements, but I was also processing some of those elements over and over and over and over, much less efficient than what my filtered would have been. So in this use case, filtered would have been the right answer.
Excellent. I love it. All right, let me do a quick refresh.
So if I would have said the other way around, what would you have said?
Honestly, I would have gone with the filtered collection.
All right, I was curious. All right, good.
Like loops just take a lot, and there's that limit on how many things that you can touch in a canvas, and like if you don't need to go through a loop, why do it? Plus, you're right, loops are generally confusing. So if there's something that we can do to make it more simple, I think that's always a good call. But it was nice to know how to do those things before some of those nifty little tools existed. So, all right, Haley definitely says it's so worth learning loops. Once it clicks, it is the best. And I will absolutely agree with you, Haley. Like, loops are not that hard. Once you get it, until you get it, they are like the hardest thing in the world.
Right.
So keep at it. If loops are something that you're not quite getting, we'll work on it. So Terry, do you have a good analogy for loops?
I really do like the concept of what I showed with the game slapjack, just because of the fact that I think that once you get the concept that the only record that matters is the card that's face up, and that's always going to be called current item in loop, it does, in my mind, that simplifies the concept quite a bit, because it takes a collection. You have to start with a collection of records, so your entire deck of cards, and you're just processing one card at a time as you go through that loop. And the only thing that matters is the one that's face up. And so to me, I have found that to be a really simple concept people seem to be able to navigate to and understand as I've explained loops to people before. I've had people say, man, that was like the best explanation I've ever heard. I understand now loops. It makes sense to me. And so like most things technology wise, and as we're learning new things, what I like to try to do is find something that you can relate to and use that concept to help translate something that might be a little more confusing from a technology standpoint. So to me, that was slapjack and a deck of cards.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen several. I just posted a link to the Salesforce admin team put out some videos on tricky flow concepts. So there's one on loops with leftovers. So if you've ever cleaned out your fridge, there's that one. Another one I've seen is socks. If you're taking laundry out of the dryer, do you pull every sock out individually and go put it away in the drawer, or do you, pull them all out, put them in a laundry basket, and then go do things,
That's a great for that.
So, and I don't know anybody who loves laundry enough to fold one sock at a time.
Right.
So, all right, Terry, where else can we learn from you about loops and other flow fundamentals, or even more complicated flow stuff?
Yeah, some of the other things that I've done with flow, I have a series on my site called From Process Builder to Lightning Flow. If you are a person who it's easier for you to learn about something new by comparing it literally side by side with something old, and from Process Builder to Lightning Flow, I will take us through an existing process builder and show you side by side, Process Builder on one screen, Flow on the other screen, how you would replicate that if you were rebuilding it inside of Flow. Again, it's just another option for those trying to understand and make that transition from one to the other. It's a great way to learn as well. So I've had a lot of people like that one. I've given that at several user groups and have shared that before. So that's another really nice tool that I have out there. I am happy to visit with those of you who lead user groups, happy to come speak to you or present to you remotely. I'm a little disappointed. The Hawaii nonprofit user group, I'm speaking with them next week. It will be From Process Builder to Lightning Flow, and they didn't invite me to come on site, and I'm just not very happy about that. I have to do it remote. That would have been the one to go on site for, right? So, so that's next Saturday. I'll be doing their user group, and that'll be a lot of fun as well. But yeah, if you see me out and about reach out. If you have a flow question, come to Flow office hours. Show up there, bring your flow with you. We'll try to help you solve whatever the challenges that you're having. You're welcome to email me, or I might be a little bit slow at getting back to you at times, depending on what my workload is. But I'll do my best to try to assist as much as I can to help the community get there with flow.
Awesome. Well, Terry, we definitely appreciate it and appreciate you coming to present here on Automation Hour as well. I gotta say, I'm a little jealous. Hawaii's never invited me to come present, virtually or otherwise.
I will recommend you. I will absolutely recommend. If you have to have Michelle there.
I would 100% go present on site for that with you as well.
Yeah, we could co-present and go on site. I think that would be even better. Yes.
Absolutely. But again, thank you. Really appreciate your time. I know I heard a little birdie told me that you're going to be presenting on Flow at Dreamforce. So if anybody can tune in and catch you there, highly recommend it. But Terry, we just appreciate you coming to present on Automation Hour, and thank you to everyone who attended. And we will see you all on the next episode. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.